Every time you open an app, your computer has to remember something. Where the file is, what you were doing before, what comes next. That remembering happens in one tiny piece of hardware. It is called as RAM. And it has gone through 5 major redesigns, each one solving a problem the last one couldn't. Let's go through all 5. DDR1, the first step. Before DDR RAM existed, computers used something called SD-RAM. SD-RAM could only send one piece of data at a time, so the computer felt slower, and things took longer to load. DDR1 changed that in the year 2000. It could send 2 pieces of data at once, instead of just one. And that's why it's called DDR, double data rate. So computers instantly felt more responsive. Speeds reached up to 400 MHz. The most memory you could get was 1 GB, enough for browsing, typing documents, light gaming. But there was a catch. DDR1 used 2.5 volts of electricity to run. That's a lot for such a small part. More electricity means more heat. More heat means more crashes. So while DDR1 solved the traffic problem, it created a temperature problem instead. DDR2. Faster, but colder. 4 years later, DDR2 arrived to fix exactly that. It used less electricity, down from 2.5 volts to 1.8 volts. Less electricity means less heat. Speed also went up, from 400 MHz to 800 MHz. And now one RAM stick could hold up to 4 GB. That meant more programs open at once, without slowing down. Here's a small detail most people never notice. Every RAM generation has a little gap cut into it, called a notch. DDR2 moved its notch to the middle. That's not random. It's done on purpose. It stops you from plugging the wrong RAM into the wrong motherboard by mistake. Smart, but there was a downside. DDR2 cost a lot when it first came out. So much that many people just kept using DDR1, even though DDR2 was better. DDR3, when RAM went mainstream. By 2007, RAM stopped being just a gamer thing. It became something everyone needed. Here's why. It used even less electricity, just 1.5 volts. So laptops ran cooler, and batteries lasted longer. Speeds went up to 1600 MHz, and memory size ranged from 4 GB to 8 GB per stick. Enough for photo editing, multitasking, casual gaming. But the real improvement wasn't speed, it was teamwork. DDR3 made it possible to use 2 RAM sticks together, working side by side, instead of just one alone. Quick myth to clear up here. A lot of people think adding a second RAM stick just gives you more space to store things. That's only half true. It also lets your computer move data through 2 paths instead of 1. So, more information can move at the same time. That matters even more if your computer doesn't have a separate graphics card. Without graphics card, your computer borrows regular RAM to draw everything on screen. So using 2 RAM sticks together doesn't just help your apps run smoother. It can help your games run smoother too. One rule to remember before we move on. Always use RAM sticks with the same speed together. If you mix different speeds, both sticks will run at the slower speed. DDR4, the one that stuck around. DDR4 launched in 2014, and it's still the most common RAM today, over a decade later. Speed ranges from 2400 MHz to 3600 MHz, and memory size ranges from 8 GB to 16 GB per stick. That's enough for video editing, coding, streaming, even heavy modern games. Here's the part most people get wrong. More RAM doesn't always mean better performance. If a game needs 12 GB and you give it 8, you'll see stutters and dropped frames. Give it exactly 12 GB and it will run smoothly. Give it 32 GB. It won't run any faster than that. The extra memory just sits there, doing nothing. RAM only helps you up to the point your task actually needs. After that, more RAM makes no difference at all. DDR5, built for the heavy stuff. DDR5 arrived in 2020 for one audience: people pushing their computers to the limit. Speeds start around 4800 MHz and go up to 6000 MHz. Memory size per stick can go from 8 GB all the way up to 32 GB. That kind of power suits 3D rendering, 4K video editing, and top-tier gaming. DDR5 also added something no earlier generation had: a built-in way to catch and fix small data errors on its own. Think of it as a built-in safety feature sitting inside the chip. It checks for tiny mistakes and quietly fixes them before they ever cause a crash. That's especially useful for long jobs like rendering, or any heavy task that runs for hours without stopping. But DDR5 comes at a price. Literally, it costs more than DDR4. And for most everyday tasks, DDR4 still does the job just fine. So the real lesson here isn't always buy the newest. It's buy whatever your own work actually needs.